Hey everybody, Tony D with another Piney podcast. The latest update on the beer virus is 3,700, not great. Went back, it's ticking back up. Again, cool your jets. We'll see what tomorrow brings. If we get another day under 3,000, then you can see the pattern here. Like every 3 days, they underreport and then overreport and then underreport. You know, every other day or every 3 days or whatever it is. There's still people getting infected. There is still, however, cases, testing, issues with that. And keep in mind that the people who get tested positive aren't rushing to the hospital. A lot of them are just going, oh, I'm positive, better stay home. That's why I don't feel great. And they're staying home and, hopefully getting better or not spreading it. There were a couple of cases. One was in a ShopRite in Toms River again. They had to, this was a few days ago, had to disinfect everything. That's just, unfortunately, that's going to happen. Somebody's going to test positive. Now, that doesn't mean that if you went into that ShopRite and you masked up and gloved up and wiped down all your groceries when you got home that you won't be fine. Chances are you would be. I just went to Target for the first time in like 2 months, and it was actually pretty good there. They're not letting a lot of people in the store. They were pretty good about distancing. They had areas roped off, and they wanted everybody to wear a mask, and I think everybody did. I saw a woman without a mask who had already come out of the store, but she was halfway through the parking lot. She might have already taken it off. So I think they're being pretty good about that. Now, I tried to go to Produce Junction. They were not being good about that. It was just too crowded in the store. I'm an idiot for going there on a Sunday, but I'll try tomorrow in the middle of the afternoon when hopefully it's dead, and I can grab a few things, get the hell out of there. There was just way too many people in there, and they were kind of close together, so I left. But they were masked up, so it wasn't too bad. I just didn't want to stand in line, and that's the real problem with some of these places. Produce Junction, for those of you who don't know, has a veggie line and a fruit line. And really, they could make it into one line, and they probably should consider doing that because it's now, I had to get veggies and fruit. Like, I don't want to wait in 2 lines. I might have toughed it out in 1 line, but 2 lines, I gotta, and they were both pretty long. So, you might say, well, wouldn't you just wait twice as long in the longer line? Maybe. But if you had twice as many employees on it, no. Right? So, changing your business model during this, that's going to be it's going to be a long-term thing. The big story related to South Jersey is Governor Phil Murphy going on the Tucker Carlson show. I don't know if you've seen this clip. It's a pretty good interview. Tucker Carlson isn't your typical partisan hack at Fox News. Now, he's very Republican, let's be honest. But he is willing to have other people on his show, and he is, for the most part, polite. He's not too... he's more of a journalist than he is a hack. Let's say that. He's more of a journalist than he is partisan. I shouldn't even call him a hack. He's pretty good at what he does. And he's relatively honest in what he does. And he grilled Murphy pretty good. Murphy's a Democrat and he's not. And, but at the same time, he treated him with pretty much respect. And I thought Murphy came off good. He answered some tough questions. He didn't really dodge too much, although he did a little bit. He's a politician, but he was, he seemed like a pretty earnest guy, kind of overwhelmed by this whole thing. And, for the most part, just trying to do it. So the one thing Tucker grilled him on was, what gives you the authority to close things down? What gives you the authority to arrest people if they refuse to quarantine, especially regarding religious services? And Murphy kind of dodged the question, but basically said, look, we're trying to work with church officials and, trying to work things out and say, I'm not against worship, but we have to worship a different way. To which Carlson said something like, "Well, you can't tell people how to worship," which is a point. However, you know, he is, on the one hand, yes, he can't tell people how to worship. But on the other hand, he is working with church officials, like, hey, work with us here, for Easter and whatnot, because there are still a lot of religious people in the state of New Jersey. We're pretty high Italian population. There's a lot of Catholics here. There's also a lot of Latino people here, and a lot of them are Catholic. There's a lot of Jewish people here, of course. We're especially up north, close to New York, where there's another high Jewish population. And I'm talking about Orthodox Jews who are very religious, and they have certain holidays. They are going to do those holidays. Tucker did not get into, are you applying the same rules to your local Muslims? But I don't get the sense, at least in New Jersey, or really in the United States, that really is an issue here. It's more of an issue in the UK, where I think because they had so much immigration from Muslim countries, because it was so fast and people didn't integrate, they're having more problems. In this country, people tend to integrate well. There's more room. You can basically do what you want. There's more freedom. And so people integrate. And so when you ask them, like, hey, can you work with us on this? They're more than willing to do so, I think, in the United States. Again, I mean, you always have some people who are idiots, but in any walk of life. But I think for the most part, people in the United States are willing to work things out. And we had a few protests here, nothing too major, and Murphy has got to be a little flexible with the southern counties, because you have to understand, Salem County's had 116 cases, and that's just the cases that tested positive. You're talking like maybe a dozen people are in the hospital in serious condition. Salem is basically open for business, or should be. I've been to Salem. It's pretty empty. It has few towns in it. There's no reason to keep it totally closed. Now, Bergen County's right across the river from New York. It's a hot spot. You're talking 20,000 people, I think. Yeah, I think 20,000, over 20,000 people tested positive. I believe you have a good 5,000 people in the hospital, but even those numbers aren't too dire when you consider the population of those counties. When you consider that, we have 85,000 cases across the state of New Jersey, but those are the positive cases, and we only have about 10% of them in the hospital. And then a very smaller portion of that are actually in very serious condition, in the ICU, like dying, which is tragic, so, and again, the 2-week lag. The 2-week lag also applies to the death rate, which unfortunately some of the media outlets are really hyping, like, oh, look at this death rate. It's just astonishing to me how partisan media outlets have become. It's just astonishing. They will take any thing to just stab at the other party, and unfortunately, a lot of these media organizations are extremely, I shouldn't call them liberal. They're no longer liberal. They're Democrat. They're partisan Democrats, and they'll do anything to push the narrative within certain bounds, within the bounds of their instructions. And they take instructions very well. So it's sad to me, that we can't all work together. Governor Murphy seems to be working with the president. The president is, has complimented him on many occasions. It's even better than the relationship he has with Cuomo. Cuomo seems to be a little agity, and keeps coming out with some statements that they don't really attack him, but they kind of like borderline do, kind of like the president does. So I don't mind it, but it's a shame that in a crisis you people just can't work together. You got to start thinking, okay, how can I get up on this? It's like, come on, dude, just get this behind us first. So, I don't want to get into the whole presidential thing. We'll do that in the next video. But in South Jersey, in my county, we have 2,100 positive cases, which again, so a few hundred people are in the hospital, and then fewer of them are in really, really serious condition. So that's the way the numbers sort of break down. It's kind of like 10%, and then like 10%, and then like 10%. So, which isn't great. But when you skew the numbers the correct way, when you look at all the information that, most of the people who are dying, the vast majority of them have underlying medical conditions. They were, in serious straits anyway, or they're very elderly. You kind of understand it. Now, anybody over the age of 50, the number starts to tick up. So I got to be a little more careful than most people. But, I don't have any major underlying health conditions that I know about. I'm only 53. Can't believe I'm saying that. I'm only 53. Well, actually, no, 54. Duh. So it's like, I'm not that far out of the ballpark, but there are plenty of people who are, there are plenty of people my age, they can barely breathe, and they get something like this, they're in big trouble. And if they have a heart condition, they can't take the medicine. So, I understand people's wariness. But then again, if you are, and I have a few relatives who are like this. I have a relative. He's in bad shape. If he got this virus, I don't know if he'd survive it. I really don't. And he is younger than me, but he has a lot of underlying medical conditions. And it could be very bad for him if he caught this. So, I mean, if I were him, and really at this stage of his life, he needs to stay in anyway. He is in such bad shape. I mean, he can't go out and party. He can't go out, surfing on the beach anyway. And he should stay in, especially during this, at least for the next year or two. But most healthy people, under the age of 50 are going to be fine. Very few of them have, it's kind of like a peanut allergy thing. Yeah, it's going to be one in a 10,000 person who, they get this and they just go right down the tubes and die. And it's tragic. But it's rare. It's super rare. The same thing, unfortunately, with the flu. The same thing with like a peanut allergy. Same thing with lots of things. So people are starting to get PO'd, and I don't blame them. I'm getting stir crazy, and I love being locked up. I mean, I don't love being locked up. I love being home to write. A couple of months ago, I was lamenting, like, man, I wish I could just go home and write for a couple of weeks. Now I have that time, and of course, I'm not getting enough done. But I'm struggling with that. I'm struggling with my productivity here. I'm producing, but I'm not producing in a rate I want to. I actually am. I'm right about the same. I'm slowly ramping up, but it's driving me nuts. But people have to work. I don't know what I'm going to do by the fall. By the fall, I'll be out of money, and it's going to be very tight for me. And if I don't have any work, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to really fall apart here. So we need to ramp things up now, especially for a guy like me. It's going to take me months. It was hard enough for me to get work outside the world of freelancing, hard enough to get freelancing work. It'll take a few months for a guy like me, kind of on the bottom of the resume pile, to just get a regular gig like I had before all this started. So things need to ramp up now so I could be working by September, October. And, and so comic book conventions could happen again, but it's probably not going to happen this year, unfortunately. That's where I made some of my money, and now that's zero. So we need to get back to work, and we just need to be careful. I just went to Target. I'm actually feeling okay about going to Target. I went, I got my stuff, I brought it in, I went through decontamination, I stripped off all my clothes, I threw them in the washer, I got a shower. I'm good. I feel good about it. I don't feel like I've contaminated myself. I hate to say it, but I'm getting used to it. It sucks. This S is old. Don't get me wrong. I'm looking forward, as the president is, to being back to normal at some point. But I'm willing to, tough it out until that happens. I see it as temporary. I think by the summer, a lot of these restrictions will be relaxed, and really we'll just be wearing masks in crowded conditions. So you'll probably wear a mask at the store. You'll probably practice social distancing. If the movie theaters open up again, it'll be like you'll have to sit 2 seats apart for a while, and then eventually it'll just cut back. Or they'll come up with something. They'll come up with some gadget that'll sanitize the air. They'll ask everybody to wear a mask, and you'll get a nice little spray of sanitizing mist when you go in and make you smell nice, and then you watch the movie, and then you go home. And everybody will 99% of the time be fine. At some point, they're going to announce, and they're very close on a few of these drugs, that they've got so many drugs that may cure this now. It's, it may be that we have several different treatments. It may be that we have a vaccine and stamp this out, or that, again, it's just something you deal with every year, like influenza. But the deal will be that most people will have some kind of resistance to it. You get it every year. Most people, it's asymptomatic. You just have to watch out for older people, as you do with influenza. So, my advice to you, if you're going stir crazy, like me, is really take stock and make sure you've done all the things that you can do at home. And I know that's hard to do. Believe me, I understand. You want to go out, you want to do things, you want to go to places. I'm not like a big go to places, do things guy, but now I'm slowly ramping up to that. But there are things, like all my neighbors, their lawns are pristine. They're cleaning everything in their house. They're doing spring cleaning and, all those things. Once you get all your ducks in a row, you're going to feel a lot better about your house and your place, wherever you live. You're going to feel a lot better about, when you finally do have to start working for the next 2 months straight, and have very little time at home. You'll feel really good looking back on, I finally straightened up that room, and now it's, I'm starting to mess it up again, but at least I started with a nice clean room. I put all my stuff away. Clean your room, as Jordan Peterson says. So things are looking better, Pineys. I advise you to seek out the Tucker Carlson interview with Governor Phil Murphy. It was a good interview and enlightening. It's not like everybody on either side of this argument or aisle or whatever politically is wrong one way or another. It's people trying to get through this. So, I'm not a Democrat anymore. I'm not a big fan of Phil Murphy in general for his policies, but I thought he came off well, and I think, he seems to be trying. He seems to be trying to deal with this. But I'll get into more of the politics in the next video.